Hello guys, and thank you for coming to my very first YouTube channel to watch my very first video. This video is not meant to turn you into a World War I historian or history professor. It is meant to just give you a very basic idea of how, why, and where World War I started and how it ended. Before the war, there existed an empire called the Austro-Hungarian Empire that loved to invade other countries and take them over to add them to their empire. As you can see from this map, they invaded quite a few countries and took land from a lot of different people. Around 1878, the Austro-Hungarian Empire militarily occupied a territory called Bosnia-Herzegovina and eventually fully annexed it 30 years later in 1908. This invasion and occupation enraged the Slavic people living in Bosnia, especially the Serbian people. The Serbs wanted to be free from the oppressive occupation of their land and their people by this foreign power, so Serbs in Bosnia and Serbia began organizing resistance groups and secret societies to fight against the oppressive and imperial rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. One of the secret societies, the Black Hand, made up of Serbian freedom fighters, became aware that the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie were scheduled to arrive in Sarajevo, the capital of present-day Bosnia, to observe military exercises. Franz Ferdinand was the nephew of the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Franz Joseph I, and was next in line to assume the throne. Franz Ferdinand intentionally chose June 28th as the day he would visit Sarajevo, knowing that a very important Serbian holiday fell on that day. This further enraged the Serbs. Ferdinand was warned not to go on that specific day because it was a very important day for the Serbian people, and seeing how much they hated him for being their occupier, his presence in Sarajevo on a Serbian holiday would anger the Serbs and they might try to kill him. He laughed off the warning and went anyway. The Black Hand then organized, armed, trained, and sent a hit team of 7 assassins to Sarajevo to assassinate the Archduke as part of their resistance to the occupation of Bosnia. On June 28, 1914, as Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were being driven down a Sarajevo street, Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb and one of the 7 assassins, shot his handgun into the car carrying the Archduke and his wife. One bullet went through the neck of the Archduke and another bullet went into his wife's stomach. They both died from their injuries. Gavrilo Princip was arrested on the scene immediately after the assassination. A total of 24 conspirators were indicted for the assassination, and since they were all basically teenagers, they were spared the death penalty and sentenced to 20-year prison sentences. Gavrilo Princip died in prison of tuberculosis in 1918 and is considered a national hero today by the Serbian people. Austria-Hungary used the assassination as the perfect excuse to declare war on Serbia. The empire had been wanting to declare war on Serbia for some time because Serbia had become stronger militarily, and this worried the Austrians. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. On that day, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary began shelling Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. This declaration of war and the shelling of Belgrade marks the official start of World War I. Austria-Hungary knew that Serbia and Russia were strong allies, and that Russia would come to Serbia's aid if anyone ever invaded her, so Austria-Hungary asked Germany for backup in case Russia got involved, and Germany agreed. After Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Russia began mobilizing her military forces on Germany's and Austria-Hungary's border. Germany then declared war on Russia. Russia and France were allies, so Germany wanted to invade France. To do this, Germany demanded free passage through Belgium in order to get to France because this was the easiest route. When that demand was denied, Germany invaded Belgium and then declared war on France, after which Great Britain came to the aid of France and Belgium and declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. By the way, the countries you see colored in light blue on the map became known as the Allied powers, and the countries in red became known as the Central powers. Shortly after, other countries began joining the war. Japan, Italy, Greece, and Romania, just to name a few, joined the Allied powers, and the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria joined the Central Powers. The United States stayed neutral for as long as she could, but after German submarines had sunk several civilian merchant ships, including some American ones, and sunk a large British civilian ocean liner called the Lusitania that had several hundred American passengers on board, 128 of them who died, the United States joined the Allied powers and finally declared war against Germany in April of 1917. About a year later, the Russian Empire, who had wanted to get out of the war for some time due to its own internal political problems and conflicts, finally signed a peace treaty with the Central Powers in March of 1918 and was officially out of World War I. About 6 months later, in September of 1918, after many losing battles, millions of casualties, and an ever-increasing number of American troops arriving every day, the Central Powers began to disintegrate when Bulgaria quit the alliance, followed by the Ottoman Empire and then by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, leaving Germany by herself. Germany then had no choice but to sign an armistice, or truce, with the Allied powers, which it did in November of 1918, officially ending World War I. There were some significant effects and results of World War I, and I will mention just 4 of them. Number 1. World War I caused the downfall and breakup of all 4 empires involved in the war: the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, and the German Empire. Number 2. The war resulted in between 16 and 17 million people being killed. Number 3. The end of the war marked the beginning of the end of European colonialism. And number 4. The League of Nations was created after the war in 1920 and would later on become the United Nations. If you learned anything from this video, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.